So that, in my view, is items 2 through 10. You may want to read those items, and then we'll move them on.
Certainly. Item number 2 is a city clerk report relative to requesting an ordinance to establish a fee schedule for election recounts. Item 3 is a motion, Wesson Zine, relative to establishing regular council meetings in the Van Nuys City Hall. Item 4 is a motion, Wesson Labange, relative to a clarification to the processing of documents related to city employee travel. Items 5 through 10 are reports from the chief legislative analyst and resolutions. Items 5, 6, and 7 are related to the city's position to support federal legislation and state legislation to strengthen gun control laws and reinstate the federal assault weapons ban. Item number 8 is to seek a sponsor of legislation relative to vehicles to enact the California Motor Vehicle Emergency Contact Locator Act of 2012. Item 9 is to support legislation that would amend the 2011 Public Safety Realignment. And item 10 is to support legislation that would extend California's current film tax credit program.
Okay, Mr. Labange, there was one item on the consent calendar where I think you had a question or two.
Just a question.
Why don't we do that? What item is that?
Well, it's on related to the assault weapons ban, and I'm looking at the city attorney. On Hollywood Boulevard between Orange and Highland, it's the most densely populated area of characters who have been in movies over the last 100 years. In there is a Darth Vader type, and I'm not hep on the whole characters, but he wears a mask, and he has a assault weapon, but it's a plastic assault weapon, and it has an orange tip on it. My question to you, if I'm a bad guy, and I want to do a bad thing, I get a suit like that, and I get a bad gun, and a real gun, and I paint it orange on top, and I go stand there and I do something bad. My question to you, Mr. City Attorney, can you protect the public with some ordinance in the CLA, I want you to listen to this, that would come up to restrict the any size of a toy gun in a public area like that? Will you look at it at least?
That certainly is something that we could look at. There's always the preemption issues, and these agenda items are related to the federal and state legislation that our attorneys in our police litigation unit and our public safety advice unit could look into whether an ordinance could be drafted that survives preemption issues.
How many police shootings, Sheriff, LA County, or the state of California have been to fake guns? You know, where there's that element there. Do I need a motion, or should I write you a letter?
A motion would probably be the most effective.
Okay.
Like
so
a motion, probably a Rule 16 motion, because it's not, these agenda items really are related to the federal legislation.
I just had to ask
So
that.
when it's you're in council, maybe a motion that could be sent to Public Safety Committee.
And I'll second a motion with you, but if you would add to that, and this is just, I'm having a senior moment here, Mr. Labange, but when you're looking into that, City Attorney, years ago when I did not have a gray mustache, I was in the legislature, and I introduced legislation that basically outlawed the orange tip on the toy guns. All of the guns were supposed to be done, and I want to say 2 colors, and like a yellow or something to that effect. So I just don't remember when it took effect. But, and believe it or not, it's something that we did work out with the NRA. If you could just, when you're doing that research, because Tommy, from here on out, when guns are produced, the ones that come here, they're supposed to be in a fluorescent green or yellow or something like that. Because when I was in Sacramento, there were a couple of deaths with young people pulling these guns. And what they would do then with the orange tip, they would buy the gun and then they color it black, or they would break it off so that it would really, from a distance, look like a real gun. So that's when we came up with this. So the guns that you would toy guns that you would buy your grandchildren or whatever are supposed to look so unrealistic.
Right. Okay, so we will do that, and I'll work with the CLA's office. Thank you very much, John.
Okay, so now without objection, those items 2 through 10 will be deemed approved. That brings us, Madam Clerk, to item 1, or Mr. City Attorney.
Actually, before we get to the items that were deemed approved, on item 4, it's the ordinance regarding city employee travel, and if the committee would care to instruct the city attorney's office to prepare the ordinance so that it'll be ready when this matter comes to council.
Oh, I see that in my notes. I just neglected to say that we request the city attorney to prepare.
Okay. And then if the committee would prefer, in the existing code section, it says city business, and we may need to provide a definition for what city business is.
Fine.
Whether you want to limit it to legislative issues or administrative issues.
Fine.
Okay.
Fine. And you should know, Mr. Labange enjoys looking at you standing up speaking from the mic. Now,
I don't know.
yeah, well, I mean, I didn't make that up. I mean, you.
I did. You look like you were professional. You look stronger when you're there than here.
I'll note that. Maybe I'll start standing up when
Yeah,
I get there.
You might want to do that. Okay, so we now have item 1. Could you read item 1 before our city attorney stands back up and says something else?
And item number 1 is a city clerk report relative to encouraging greater voter participation through alternative voting methods and the use of city facilities as polling places in response to motions by Perry Parks and a motion by Labange Buscaino.
Okay, well, I have 2 cards, Joe Lawrence, or Lawrence Joe, and Aisha Wadila. Come on. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Lawrence Joe. I'm with the project director for the California Participation Project. Was invited here to be listen in on the testimony on the proposed changes to the voting system. And one of the things that we're working on as part of the California Participation Project is putting together a coalition of organizations since November, or since actually July of 2012, where we brought a lot of groups together, civic engagement groups, to encourage voter participation throughout the city and throughout the county. We've had a lot of success doing that. And looking at the preliminary report that the city clerk put out, we have a lot of overlap with the LA City Votes Coalition that's doing outreach with the same partners. And so we're very excited to be a part of that coalition. One of the things that we're very interested in seeing in order to increase voter turnout, I think, in the city of LA elections, is looking at alternative ways to change the timing of the elections, because we do notice that from different kind of reports that the timing of the elections is really, really important to affecting turnout. And so that's one of the things that we are supportive of, as well as looking at early voting as an option. One of the things that we are concerned about, though, is making sure that there's enough material that's available to our partners with enough advance time to make sure that we can do the outreach that we need to do to make sure that people are, knowledgeable about when the elections are coming up, the information that's being, about the ballot measures and such. And so, with 1 month advance notice, that's not a whole lot of time. So as much time as we can get to do that, we think that we can really make a difference in increasing turnout. So thank you for your time and attention.
No, thank you for coming.
I'm reading a letter from Councilman Perry.
Go right ahead.
Dear Council President Wesson and Council Member Labange, in the past, voter turnout at city elections has been extremely low. It is vitally important to our democracy to encourage greater voter participation by making our city polling places as easily accessible as possible. Although I understand it is too late to implement any major structural changes in time for the 2013 elections, I believe we need to have a larger conversation about how we are outreaching to our voters. Los Angeles needs a major initiative to make voting more accessible by conducting greater voter outreach and increasing voter turnout through measures such as early voting, regional voting centers, and alternate voting days. I'm aware of LA City Votes campaign spearheaded by the city clerk last year. I applaud their efforts to work with advocate groups to disseminate election information to more communities, especially those with high concentrations of non-native English speakers. I would like the city clerk to report back in 4 months with an update of their outreach efforts and to conduct further research on early voting centers, and alternative election days, and what impact it may have on city elections and voter turnout. Sincerely, Councilwoman Jan Perry.
Thank you very much. June, you want to come up for a minute?
You got a minute?
Oh, you have a surrogate? You know, I do better with short people, but I'm going to allow you, I'll give you a height waiver, okay? Go right ahead.
Thank you for the waiver. My name is Jacob Wexler, and representing the City Clerk Elections Division. The item before you today is a report that we prepared in response to two motions. The motion from Council members Perry and Parks related to alternative voting methods to encourage voter turnout, and in addition, a motion by Mr. Labange related to the use of public facilities for polling places. Our report, in terms of the alternative voting methods, looked at early voting, voting centers, and the change of voting days, as was alluded to. Just briefly to run through the three approaches. Early voting entails giving voters the opportunity to vote in various voting centers around the city in the weeks leading up to the election. A voter can walk into any one of those centers and would be able to vote on whatever races they're eligible to vote on. The city did have early voting for the 2003 and 2007 elections using a touchscreen voting devices, but subsequent to that, the California Secretary of State decertified that equipment. And we no longer have access to the equipment that we would need in order to manage early voting in that same way. In those two elections, the use of early voting was relatively minimal. I think the highest number that we had was under 3,500 voters took advantage of that, which was less than 2% of the electorate. But since that time, 2008, I think early voting sort of took off nationwide, so it could be that it would have a greater impact on voter turnout now than it did in those early years. Voting centers is just the sort of running larger voting either precincts that incorporate many precincts into one center, or having voting centers similar to what we do for early voting, where somebody can go in and vote at any time. Usually we would consider that as part of a different type of election, maybe an all vote by mail election, where we want to still have a few precincts open. Some of the same technological concerns that affect early voting would also impact our ability to run voting centers at this time. And finally, alternative election days. In our report, we looked at moving the elections from the weekday, from a Tuesday to a weekend day. We did not find evidence that the day of the week that the election is held impacts voter turnout, and we were a little bit concerned about some of the logistical concerns of running an election on a Saturday, making sure we could still get the same number of polling places and poll workers. We did not look at the proposals that were made before that were just discussed.
How weird would that be?
To vote on Saturday?
Yeah.
They do it in some locations. They do that.
Like what? I'm just curious. I mean, it's, when I think of an election, it's Tuesday. I mean, it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Give me some examples.
Some examples. Let me pull it our report.
Okay.
Or maybe Chris can tell me. Good. Here's my answer. I'm going to defer to Chris Garcia of my staff.
Hey there.
Chris Garcia, City Clerk. States like Hawaii and Louisiana hold their non-federal elections on weekends. Other jurisdictions like San Francisco recently adopted ordinances that provide them the option of holding a Saturday election if funded through with private funds.
Are there comparisons where it relates to the turnout on a weekend compared to a Tuesday?
From what we can tell, they're neither higher nor lower. They seem to be steady with a regular Tuesday election. So that lends us to conclude that, or at least leads us to conclude that like a Saturday, Sunday, or both won't necessarily impact voter turnout in a dramatic way.
They have Sunday elections?
Some have the option of a Sunday election, but mostly it's Saturday election. Some have experimented with weekend elections, so both days. Santa Monica once did that, where they had Saturday and Sunday, although that led to concerns about how to secure the ballots and the polling place equipment. So it's been done before, yeah.
Mr. Labange.
In the city hall, there was a executive assistant.
No, wait a second. No, wait 1 second. I forgot. For the record, what's your height?
My height, 5'8".
You're borderline. Go back to you, Mr. Labange.
All right, thank you. Pat Gobbler. Anybody remember Pat Gobbler at all?
I do.
She worked for John for All.
Yes.
She would always go up to the vote early in City Hall. Do you remember that at all? I'm looking at some of the veterans here. They used to allow, when it was a city election, to go up and vote early.
We opened a paper tech. Anybody?
No,
can
in
come.
City Hall. This is like 20 years ago.
Well, the election division used to be at City Hall, but now we're at Piper Tech, and we do allow early voting. Anybody can come in within 29 days of the election, all the way up through election day, and they can vote a ballot and pick up.
Well, here's the only thing I would say if we want to look at is if we took our city halls, and maybe it would be difficult here because of the parking, or maybe we have it because people walk in or use transit. But the Hollywood City Hall, the Marvin Browdy Center, Van Nuys City Hall, West Los Angeles, all these municipal buildings, could they be points that we could push people to on the early 29-day in our normal process and to make sure that ballots are secured? Could that be looked at? And the other thing, too, that I just wanted to drive the point on, people get confused because if it's a county election, it's either a county or a city election, right, June? So the county has polling places and we have polling places, and they're two different polling places. And what frustrates people is when they come and they usually go to the recreation center, but now it's over at somebody's garage in an alley. I think there has to be consistency between the city election division and the county register of polling places. And I do believe that what they do in Silver Lake, in my neighborhood, is they put 4 precincts together. Would that be the proper term?
Yes.
Yeah, and they get a lot of people. And then I know our chiefs just left in the fire department. But the one thing about voting in a fire station, it's open, people see it, it's usually on a major street. Oh, I forgot to vote, today's election day. They pop in and they vote. I think that's the thing that we want to, that I'm proud of if we use municipal buildings. That was my motion, Mr. Buscaino, and I got one clap from someone over there who
Happens to work for you.
Yeah, he does work for me. That's all right. Okay, so that's the concept. Are our polling places going to be different than the November election of 2012 to the municipal of 2013?
So we use the same database that the county has of polling places, and our one of the priorities that we look at is to try to have consistency so voters have that transparency. We want them to have the same experience whether they're voting a county or a city election in terms of the equipment that they use and also in terms of the location that they vote.
Well, you want to check my precinct? Because that's the test, because I don't understand why, especially because you use it in a municipal building, the park. And people like the parks and the libraries and there's local centers there.
Right.
But I was just curious,
Yeah.
and we'll move on.
Right.
Why is it that there's a difference in polling places, when it's a county run compared to a city run? And even if it's a county run, couldn't they use the regular polling places that we in the city already have in place? Because Mr. Labange is right. You always get calls from people saying, I've voted at the same place for 25 years, and why am I not there?
We couldn't agree with you more, and that it is our goal to try to use the same polling places that the county uses. Occasionally, there will be a place that will not make themselves available to us, and that would make it difficult. But the vast majority of the locations that we use are public facilities, and that's our goal. There are some situations where we do have to use, a residence. It's, I think, less than 10% of the polling places. And often in those situations, that is the place where people have voted continually. I mean, we're recruiting over 1,000 polling places for our 1,600 precincts. And, we can't always get our first choice, but it is definitely a priority to do exactly what you're asking us to do, which is to have that consistent experience from the voters from one election to the next, from the county to city elections.
Oh, so you've decided to join us.
I'm 5 feet.
That's why I love you very much.
So one other reason is that the precinct shapes do not always coincide with the city precincts with the ones that the county established. So the lines may not be exactly the same, and we may not be able to use the facility. As Jacob said, it is our priority to use as many of the similar facilities as we can. But sometimes it is not possible. Sometimes the facility will have a pre-reservation or of a different event for the day that we like, or they will charge and we are trying to keep it cost-free, or the lines don't line up. So I thought I would throw that in.
Okay, that's fine.
That's a question. Does the Recreation and Parks Department, Library Department, Fire Department charge you for use of their buildings?
No, city facilities do not charge us. Yeah.
Zero charge. And when you have it in a garage at somebody's home, do you pay that person?
We do pay that person.
And what do you pay that person?
$50? $50 per precinct. So
For a precinct, okay. All right, I just think it's something we want to look at, because people love their public buildings, and it creates a moment to gather in communities.
But nobody loves them like you.
All right, okay. Thank
Nobody
you.
loves
Thank
their
you so
public
much.
buildings like you,
Okay.
Mr. Labongi. Okay, I want to thank you guys for your report. And I don't think that Ms. Perry's request was, I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
So, if we could, in what did she say, 4 months? Maybe we could have another conversation about this?
we'd be more than happy to continue our conversation with our partners and come back and report to this
Okay.
council. The only thing I would say is that 4 months from now, we'll maybe in the heat of the May runoff, so maybe that isn't the,
So maybe what we'll do is
after our,
come up with a better way to
after
do
our
that.
elections are
5 months.
Okay.
under our belt.
All right, maybe 5 months, Laban says. No, we want to give them a couple of weeks to relax.
Okay, all right. 6.
Okay.
We may have a runoff in Council District 6 in July as well. So.
I forgot all about, no, I forgot all about that, because that primary is in May.
Correct.
Okay, I forgot all about that. Yes, she's back.
I was just saying perhaps at the conclusion of our entire election period, we could assess and then give us enough time to look at our experience and our facts, and then we would prepare an in-depth report back to you.
Okay, that makes sense. Holly, you good? You don't want to come up and state your height and... Well, you have a permanent waiver, okay? You have a temporary one. We'll see how you act the next time. Again, I appreciate all of your work and the information. Mr. Labange, without objection where it relates to this item, I think we just note and file the city clerk's report. Madam Clerk, is there any more business before Mr. Labange's committee today? Because he's the chairman today.
No, that includes all the items, and there are no additional speaker cards.
So with your permission, sir,
You betcha.
this committee's adjourned.
Thank you.